Okay, so we're getting into a section of Unit 6.1 where we can't just cross multiply, all right? We're not allowed because we have a fraction here and a fraction here. So there are two fractions on one side. Cross multiplication basically is not an option, okay? So in order to kind of tackle this, we have to go to that LCM method, all right? We have to find least common multiple / least common denominator. So now the big question is, how do we identify that least common denominator? Okay, well, it's actually really easy. Okay, we're going to kind of set up to bust this fraction, and we're going to take from our denominators, we're going to take every factor that appears one time. All righty, so x appears here once, so I'm going to use x as a factor or a part of our least common denominator, and x minus 3 appears once here, but it also appears once over here, so I only need to use it one time as part of my least common multiple, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bust this fraction by multiplying both sides by this quantity. Now notice that I did not multiply it out. I didn't distribute the x, and that actually makes it a lot easier as we are simplifying, okay? So let's take a look at what that looks like. All right, I'm going to try and use colors so that we can see each step, okay? I have to distribute this quantity, and I am going to distribute first to the first fraction. Well, if you take a note, if I took x times x minus 3, and divided it by x, those x's would cancel each other. So x minus 3 is all that's left to multiply by this 1. So x minus 3 times 1 is x minus 3, okay? Likewise, I'm going to take this whole chunk of beans here and I'm going to multiply it by the second fraction, okay? And if you notice, the whole point is that this x minus 3 has something over here to cancel with, which it will. It'll cancel with this x minus 3. So that'll go bye-bye. X minus 3's cancel. Then all you have is the x that multiplies by this 1. So we're left with plus, comes from here, x equals. And from there, we have, let's see, what color have I not used? Okay, we're going to also distribute it on this side of the equation. And notice that our x minus 3 cancels with the x minus 3. That's the whole point. And so we are left with x times x minus 2. X times x minus 2. Now we just have a fairly straightforward equation that we can solve. All right, so when I simplify, distribute, and move junk around, I end up with 0, because it is quadratic, we're going to use that 0 product property, equals x squared minus 4x plus 3. So I'm going to go ahead and factor this little fella. I do believe it is factorable. I can do x and minus 4 multiplying to positive 3, so minus 3 minus 1, okay? So x could be 3. Or x could be 1. Those are our two solutions. Now we do need to revisit back to the beginning and identify not or excluded solutions. So here, x can't be 0 because that would make that little guy 0. And we also have a situation here where x can't be 3 because that would make this denominator 0. Well, look at what just happened. We came up with a solution of 3, but that solution is not allowed. So that is called an extraneous solution, and we would have to exclude it or not communicate it as a possible solution to this equation, okay? So we only have really one solution, x equals 1. All right, so here's another example, and we actually have some pretty good factors going on in our denominator here. We know that we see 2 fractions on one side, so therefore we can't use our cross multiplication method. We have to use the least common denominator method, or common denominator. All right, so we're going to be busting this fraction. So let's go through and figure out what we actually need as our factors for our least common multiple. Okay, so we have 4 in here, but 4 appears over here. So I know, well, let me put 4 in over here as our start, and I'll add to it if I need to. 4 is right here, but there's already a 4 here, so I don't need to add a 4 again. And then 2n is over here, but there's already a 2 incorporated in this 4 and an n right here, so I don't need to add anything else to this 4n. Okay, 4n can be my least common denominator because every quantity here divides into 4n, so we're good to go. All right, so let's start this process of simplifying and distributing. I'm going to try and use different colors. So let's take 4n and distribute it to the first fraction. Notice how this 4n would cancel completely with this 4n. So all that's left is the n minus 3. N minus 3 equals, now let's come to the other side. This 4n has to distribute here, and the 4 here cancels with this guy. So all we're left with is n times 1, or n. Alrighty, now we have to have 4n distribute to this fraction, and notice how we have 2n dividing into 4n. Well, the n's cancel, and then 4 divided by 2 is 2. So we're going to have plus 2 times the n plus 2. That's a little confusing there, or it can be. Okay, so make sure you kind of stop and think about, it's the 4 divided by 2 is 2. So there's 2 left over that has to multiply by my n plus 2. Now it's just an equation, and all we have to do is Alrighty, so when we finish solving, we end up with n equals -7 halves. Now we do need to take our time and go back to the beginning and check out and make sure that we don't have any excluded possibilities or extraneous solutions. So here in this denominator, n can't be 0. Here you can't change 4, 4 is 4, and here n can't be 0. So we need to make sure that we did not end up with n equals 0 as our solution, which we did not. So we have no extraneous solutions here. I can spell, I promise. Extraneous solutions. Okay.